After the disaster in Bahrain, where neither car finished, it was a good weekend for Red Bull Racing in Saudi Arabia. Sergio Perez took pole and teammate Max Verstappen the win. More than that, a great weekend for Formula One. A fantastic battle between Verstappen and Ferrari's Charles Leclerc. And most of all, proof that the new 2022 cars do indeed allow the cars to race more closely. The winning margin was just 0.549 seconds, the closest since Pierre Gasly's win at Monza in 2020. Welcome to the Go F1 show. I'm your host, Matthew Marsh, and we're obviously very excited about round two of this 2022 Formula One World Championship. And staying up late with us tonight in Asia to bring you this show live, of course, is our regular co-host, the former Minardi Formula One driver, Alex Young over in KL. Alex, the drivers seem genuinely excited about these new era of cars. Are you joining them in that enthusiasm?
Absolutely. I mean, it's fantastic to see drivers and teams being able to actually race. I think in the Pirelli era, this is the first time we've actually seen that. And when I say race, I don't just mean overtake. I mean people being able to come back and have another move at them, you know. So I have to really say, really well done by FIA. They really got the regulations perfect. Good job by Pirelli as well. You know, sorting out the thermal degradation means that you can follow closely as well, and you don't just disappear after trying to be in someone's slipstream. So good job all around, and I'm enjoying the racing so much.
Fantastic. Well, so am I. Well, look, let's sort of do a quick summary of where we ended up with the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. It was, of course, Sergio Perez who started on pole position after 220 races in Formula One, and he became the first Mexican ever to take pole position in Formula One. Lap 16 was his demise, of course. He was the first to pit. Then Nicholas Latifi crashed his Williams in the last corner. Safety car deployed. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari takes the lead. Then we had on lap 38 a virtual safety car deployed, but Fernando Alonso's Alpine, Daniel Ricciardo's McLaren both coming to a halt at about the same time there. I think it was on lap 37. So lap 38 was the safety car, virtual safety car deployed. Then we get into this fantastic battle between Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen for the lead. Eventually, lap 47, Max Verstappen taking the lead and holding it all the way to the finish. A Ferrari double podium and only actually 13 finishes at the end of that. I was surprised that we didn't get a big crash. I'm pleased we didn't, but I was surprised about that, Alex.
Yeah, but we had plenty of drama still anyway, even without the accidents. But we've had, I think, more than a fair share of crashes this weekend anyway. Of course, we had Schumacher in qualifying, had a couple F2 and F3 big accidents as well. So, again, we have that slight feeling that we're getting through Saudi Arabia, getting a little bit lucky. I still think we have to look at the safety of the track. I know they made some improvements, but all the drivers said that they were minuscule, could hardly tell. So still need to rethink this, I think. But yeah, what an eventful race. And you have to feel, you know, for Perez, don't you? Sergio was driving superbly in the first third of that race, first quarter of that race. Nice 2.5 second gap to Leclerc, and went for his first pit stop, and straight after that had the safety car come out. So that put him to fourth, didn't it? And it was very hard for him to recover from that.
Well, here are the results then. Max Verstappen for Red Bull Racing wins the race. Charles Leclerc, just as I said at the beginning of the show, only half a second behind, but did get the point for fastest lap, finishing second. Carlos Sainz, Ferrari, third. Sergio Perez in the second. Red Bull is fourth, 10 seconds off the leaders by the end of the race. George Russell there coming in fifth for Mercedes. Esteban Ocon, sixth in the first of the two Alpines. The other one, of course, retired. Seventh, Lando Norris for McLaren. Eighth, Pierre Gasly for AlphaTauri. Ninth, Kevin Magnussen for Haas. And 10th, Lewis Hamilton for the Mercedes team. And then Guan Yu Zhou just missed out on a point. He got one in his first race, doesn't he? His second. He's there 11th for Alfa Romeo. Nico Hülkenberg for Aston Martin, 12th. And then the last of the finishers, Lance Stroll for Aston Martin there in 13th. Those are the runners. And, of course, Max Verstappen winning the race. So I suppose the big story here is, Alex, first of all, is Max. We've got to talk about Max Verstappen winning that race. And there's this battle, isn't there, between the two 24-year-olds. Charles Leclerc won the first race of the season, Max Verstappen winning the second. But let's talk about Max for a second. Was that a good race, do you think, from him today?
No, actually, I don't think so. I think he got a little bit lucky with that. I mean, they were very evenly balanced, you have to say. But I'm starting to see a few cracks in Verstappen's armor. You know, the great thing we saw last year was Verstappen coming to the fore. And it was the first time Hamilton had been beaten in wheel-to-wheel battles since forever. Since a really long time. I think since 2012, really. Because Rosberg and Bottas never could really beat him in wheel-to-wheel battles. Vettel couldn't either. And Verstappen was getting the better of Hamilton. Okay, there's some question marks whether how clean Verstappen was at times last year. But he was racing really well. But so far this year, Leclerc's really had the better of him. You know, he had the better of him in Bahrain. And then today, because Verstappen had two goals to try and take Leclerc, and Leclerc was very smart at that last corner, and re-overtook Verstappen, brake before the line to get the DRS, and those were two goals that Verstappen spurned. I don't think he was sharp enough at that point. And in a normal race, you only get two shots. Sometimes you're lucky to even get one shot. Lucky Verstappen, not lucky, because Verstappen drove really well to close back up again and get within DRS. But Verstappen had another shot to overtake, and he took it on the third shot. So, still, I mean, he deserved the win. But for me, I still think Leclerc raced smarter and better than Verstappen today, and it could have easily gone the other way. And even though Verstappen had that superior straight line speed, Leclerc could have won today.
I'm with you completely on that. I'm kind of surprised a week ago in Bahrain, and I was thinking maybe he's playing the long game. This is Max Verstappen I'm thinking about, but being re-overtaken by Charles. Today again, that moment when they locked up into the last corner, corner 27. Really very surprising. We're going to have to call in our special guest, I think, on this, Alex, to get further insight into the mind of. I mean, you're a racing driver, so you sit on one side of the bench. We're going to bring in somebody, our special guest tonight. You know him very well. We all know him. His name is Trevor Carlin. Yeah. He's the founder of one of the most famous teams in the feeder series of Formula 2, Formula 3, Formula 4, and so on. 8 of the current F1 drivers drove for Carlin. Sebastian Vettel here. Daniel Ricciardo, George Russell, Lando Norris, perhaps most recently Yuki Tsunoda, of course, and then Nicholas Latifi, Kevin Magnussen, Carlos Sainz. And I don't know whether Alan van der Merwe was on the grid today driving the medical car. If he was, he's also a former Carlin alumni, but the list goes on. If I was to give a full introduction to Trevor, that would be basically most of the show taken up. Anyway, Trevor, welcome to the Go F1 show from sunny England.
I hope you can hear me, guys. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me all right. Cool. Sorry for the delay getting in touch. Typical IT stress. I'm here in England. Unforeseen. I was meant to be in Saudi Arabia this weekend, but unfortunately I was tested positive for the dreaded COVID last weekend, and basically couldn't travel. So I had to watch the Formula 2 race and the Formula 1 race from home. So I feel like I've been missing out a little bit. But it's quite exciting. The typical 2022 Formula 1. It's going down to the last few laps. So it was brilliant to see. We seem to be, every time we watch a Formula 1 race at the moment, it's exciting. Who's to complain about that? It's fabulous. I'm really happy. And being a fan, obviously I work in the industry, but to be able to watch it at home, it's pretty exciting, and hopefully it's bringing many more fans, and we'll keep them coming.
Well, your unfortunate circumstances with COVID, we're glad to see that obviously you've recovered from that, are a benefit to the viewers of Go F1, and we're delighted to have you with us tonight. Thank you for being with us. And we want to get some insight. Alex and I were just talking about this battle we've got in these first two races between Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen, the two 24-year-olds, and whether, in fact, Max is slightly disappointing in his racecraft. What do you think?
Well, I think that's one thing you can never say, that Max Verstappen is ever disappointing with his racecraft. He's a born racer. Every time he's in a position to challenge for a position, he takes it. So, everyone's sort of pointing at the Red Bull having a faster car, and they are fast in a straight line, I'll give you that. But, the Ferrari is a really strong package. And I think Max is having to do everything he can and use all his wiliness to get ahead. And the fact it took him 3 bites of the cherry, I think is lucky for Max that the new cars and the new regulations allow that. Because a few years ago, or actually last year, he wouldn't have been able to get away with that. So this could really play into Max's hands, because we've seen it so many times. He's relentless, and he just doesn't give in. And fair play to Charles. He didn't make it easy. He did a brilliant job of defending. But sometimes, you got to know when you beat.
Well, and I think that's what. Yeah, and Alex, this is the thing. I think, to me, the guy that stands out tonight, as in Bahrain, actually, I thought Charles showed real coolness under fire, actually.
Yeah, I thought he did. I mean, I think he's been very clever. He knew about the last corner of the DRS, and you don't want to go cross that line first. Like Trevor said, Max was fortunate to get that third go, because you wouldn't get that go. You only get 1 or 2 shots normally, up until this year. So it's great to see that you can have these opportunities to fight back. And even once Verstappen got in front, Leclerc had a chance to get back and almost had him as well. I think on the penultimate lap, we hadn't had those yellow lights, the yellow flags. Maybe Leclerc could have had a run on Verstappen into turn 1. So it's fascinating to watch. And the other thing also I really enjoyed about watching that fight was how hard the boys are racing on a street track. They really were balls to the wall. It's like watching Macau, Trevor, for me. How close they were getting to the barriers, the risks they were taking. It's very hard to see the subtleness of how many risks they were taking, but they were taking massive risks at the end, getting crossed up on curbs, getting very close to the barrier. You only see that happen in Macau, really, because you don't really normally see it in a Formula One race at a street track, because it's normally done by the end of the race, and people are just maintaining gaps, and because of the dirty air, you normally can't get close enough. But today, both drivers had to be flat out and get as close to the wall as possible.
You're absolutely dead right with your synergy between Macau and this racetrack. Macau, obviously one of our favourite tracks from Formula 3, and you watch when you're running fast drivers around Macau, you watch with a sense of trepidation, and it's full jeopardy. It's incredible, and that's what I've seen with Saudi Arabia, which is incredible to watch for us spectators and the teams. But the risk levels are massive, and the thing now with these Formula One cars, they are so fast, and they're so heavy, and when things go wrong, they go wrong in a big way. So I think even though the cars have been made so much safer with the halo and the side protection, all these things, we run the risk of having situations where the impacts are so big that we're into concussions and things like this. One of the F2 drivers couldn't race because of concussion. I think Mick Schumacher, really, he says he could have raced, but it would have been wrong to race because he's probably still a bit dazed. So, as we fix one physical issue with the safety in F1, then the problems become more, more unseen. So, we have to be aware of this, and a track like this really highlights the potential issues. So, thank goodness everyone's okay. And we had a very safe, F2 race and an F1 race. So, but we have to be aware, we solve one problem and create others.
You're making a point, Trevor, which I think is very valid. And before we get on to talking about Carlos Sainz, one of your former drivers who we mustn't forget, finished third today. I wonder if I may just rewind the clock slightly to 3 or 4 months ago when we had the first Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. We had Stefan Johansson on the show, and to listen to what Stefan said, if you like, on first blush of looking at this circuit, because he, like you and like I, and I think Alex, was somewhat troubled by the layout and maybe surprised about it in this modern era. Let's hear what Stefan Johansson had to say last year.
It's a strange circuit, I think. I mean, obviously I haven't seen it in real, but just looking at the TV and understanding the speed and the lap times, it's sort of puzzling to me how anyone came up with this particular concept, because from being kind of obsessed with every safety measure known, suddenly we have one of the fastest tracks on the calendar, which is basically just following a line of barriers like a street circuit. So it's kind of an odd layout, I think, and obviously the fear before the race was very much, what the safety aspect was going to be, and although there wasn't any serious accident, but there were certainly plenty of accidents that disrupted the flow of the race quite significantly, I would say, overall.
So that's that. I suppose the question that actually Stefan was asking last year is, why did the circuit get designed the way it was? I mean, there's some physical limitations, obviously, and there was a rush to have a Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, and we've got away with it, I think, is what we're concluding. But I guess that's the question. Who wants to go first on the answer to that one?
Which way are we going to go? Politics or safety? Gosh. I'll go first, I guess. Yeah, I think on the safety side, it has to be looked at. But yes, so do we want to go to the politics side as well? I'll let Trevor take the politics side.
Thanks. At the end of the day, there's the motorsport is a sport, but it's also a highly expensive business. And at some stage they needed the Saudi officials needed to have a Grand Prix as soon as possible. This was obviously the quickest way to do it. They've managed to build a circuit that the FIA approved on safety grounds. You'd say it's in current for the amount of trouble we go to make the cars safer, it's absolutely borderline from a safety point of view, but it's also spectacular. We've got a real conflict here of what we're trying to do to make things safer and do the right thing, and then have the show. So it's a fine line. I'm surprised this layout has been allowed to happen in 2021. To be honest with you.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about now somebody who you know well, Trevor. Carlos Sainz finished third today, 27 years of age, but not quite on the pace of the other Ferrari drivers. So good result, 2 Ferraris on the podium. Everybody's happy. What do you think about that performance?
Well, I can only imagine Carlos would be gutted. It's two races on the trot now. He's been shown the door by Charles. Which is a bit strange, because last year it was the other way around. Carlos was in the ascendance, and I think he expected this year to start proving his mettle. The fact he's signed a new contract with Ferrari, so I would imagine Carlos is really, really disappointed with his performance. But he's the sort of guy that he's not going to rest until he finds out what the issues are. And he'll work very hard and adapt his driving and the car to suit himself. So, if a bad day for Carlos Sainz is P3, and he's upset, then that's a good sign. And so I think Charles's biggest fight is going to come from those 2 guys that are on the podium, Max and Carlos. It's going to be they're the 3 guys for the championship all the way, and it's going to be down to DNFs and accidents who's going to win it. I mean, it's very possible that Carlos could sort himself out and come to the ascendant. So I think it's a case of watch this space.
Yeah, 3rd consecutive podium, of course, for Carlos, and 17th consecutive points finish, which is it's pretty impressive. Speaking about things that are impressive, my favourite chart after a race is the race performance chart, which the lovely Tessa has put together for us. And you can see here, the green is good and the red is bad. So Sergio Perez, of course, losing 3 places. Esteban Ocon losing 1. And there's Lewis Hamilton gaining 5 positions. Let's talk about Lewis first of all there. And then we can talk about Lando Norris, I think, as the sort of 2 guys who raised most positions. Lewis Hamilton, what do you think, Alex?
Yeah, first half of the race was very good. So he would have obviously wanted more. Obviously, Mercedes are not where they want to be. It was unusual seeing Hamilton so out of his comfort zone in qualifying, didn't even make it out of Q1. So he's going to have to. It's an unusual position. He's not been in. I've not seen him as uncomfortable in an F1 car since when he was in McLaren, going up against Button, or perhaps even the first year of Mercedes when he was there with Rosberg. He'd have a couple of bad races there, but we haven't seen this sort of struggle before, and can't look too much into it because of course it's the car as well. It's just struggling to get the most out of it. But yeah, I think 10th place was pretty much the best he could do today.
And he could have done a little bit better because they got unlucky, didn't they, with the virtual safety car on lap 37, 38. And if he just got into the pits, then maybe could have. But as you say, when you're 37 years of age, which is, I don't know what that feels like yet. But when you're 37 years of age, does it get a bit tiring a bit quickly with this having to drive a car that's this bad?
I mean, from my point of view, I mean, Lewis is, obviously, currently the greatest driver that exists. He's got he's won everything, but he's also a very moral and emotional guy, and I think the events of the last week or so. Have probably had a bit of an effect on him. The lack of performance from the car, the fact the issues in Saudi, before the race and what happened on Saturday, or Friday night. So I think these things play on him, and I think sometimes we've got to allow him to be just a regular human being. And he had a bad day. He didn't want to take any risks. He didn't want to do anything stupid. He knows he didn't have a car to win, so he probably didn't want to be there. So what he had to do, and he'll be on a jet out of there tonight and focusing on Australia. So I think he just had a bad weekend. So I think we can allow him that. He deserves it, and he's earned that right.
And then by contrast, Alex, George Russell into 5th place.
Yeah, well, that's qualifying really. That's where it all got set up, So yeah, George Russell I think he maximised what he could get from the package. It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, Mercedes were further away this weekend than I thought they would be. We know they struggled in Bahrain, but they still managed to get 3rd and 4th, didn't they? Okay, a bit after Red Bull had a double retirement. But yeah, I mean, Russell had a good race today, pushing hard all the way. And yeah, I mean, he is a very exciting talent for the future. I mean, and I'd love to get Trevor's point of view on this as well, because, he's a driver that you feel that will mature into someone that can fight for world championships.
Yeah, I mean, George is a class act. He's probably bit frustrated because he's been waiting for his opportunity to be in the Mercedes and be fighting for race wins like he did when he stepped in a couple of years ago. He's proven he can win races. At the moment, he's stepped into a team that's hasn't quite got the car. But the thing about George is he's a super intelligent guy. He's super hard working, So, you know, I don't know if you guys have realised, but he's really under the radar at the moment. He's not doing any media that he doesn't have to do. He's keeping his head down. He's working hard behind the scenes with the team. So he's playing the long game here, and he'll be driving the team, helping the team to turn that car around. And when it's ready, himself and Lewis will go, instead of being the third best team, which they currently are. They're just going to start moving forward, and then we'll see, you know, how George can perform. You know, when he's up against Max and Charles and Lewis, that's when it's going to get tough. Today, really, he's damage limitation. He's driving around. But, you know, I'm not being flippant, but he's keeping his nose clean and bringing the car home in the position the only position it was capable of. But it's how he's going to perform when the car's ready to win. That's how it's going to be interesting. But yeah, George is a class act and a real hard-working bloke.
And also, we also have to remember with George, he's going to be overweight, isn't he? Because I think pretty much all the cars on the grid are over the weight at the moment. And George will be a few kilos heavier than Hamilton just because of his height. And I wonder, I can't know for certain, but I wonder if there might be half a tenth in that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't know the details myself. I mean, George is tall, but he's also extremely lean. If you look at him, I mean, he's carrying no extra mass. Lewis is shorter, but he's squatter and obviously carrying a bit more muscle. So there will be a difference in weight, but as you probably said, Alex, it's probably 2 or 3 kilos tops. But it does have a penalty over a race distance for sure.
Yeah.
So that's the Mercedes guys covered, and in particular, we're looking at Lewis Hamilton gaining 5 positions, George gaining, I think it was 1. Lando Norris gained 4, another driver you're very familiar with. And I want to talk a little bit about Lando, but also in comparison to Daniel Ricciardo, because there's been a lot of light shone on Daniel, last 5 races being out qualified by Lando, I'm pretty sure. I'm going to just double check that as I speak. My view on it is that Lando is misunderstood. People don't realise how good Lando is, and it's not necessarily that Daniel's got a problem. It's that Lando is unbelievably mega, and that it's a bit like when Alex was driving alongside Fernando Alonso. We didn't realise how good Alex was because we didn't realise how good Fernando is. So, Trevor, your thoughts on that? Because you know Lando very well. He raced for you.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Really, because he's such a amenable young man. Lando, people think he's just a nice kid going motor racing. What they don't realise is just how extremely competitive and how fast he is. He will get the ultimate out of that McLaren car, and the fact that he's been there now for a few years, the team would have tailored the car to suit him. So any nuances he wanted from the car he's got, and Daniel, he still hasn't quite clicked with him at McLaren. I know he won the Grand Prix, but it still hasn't really clicked, and I just see things going from strength to strength with Lando, because he extracts everything from the car more than it's capable of, really. I mean, he's a Max Charles type driver. So yeah, he's overperforming. He's getting more out of the car than it's capable, and Daniel's probably getting the potential, but it's not enough. And Daniel's confidence is suffering, obviously.
Yeah, 100%. Well, let's talk about the people whose confidence isn't suffering. Let's look at the point scoring, the World Drivers' Championship standings after 2 rounds. Of course, Charles Leclerc there has 45 points. He's leading his teammate Carlos Sainz with 33. Max Verstappen for Red Bull Racing is 3rd with 25 points. George Russell for Mercedes, I think, will be relatively pleased actually to be there 4th with 22 points, ahead of his teammate Lewis Hamilton with 16. Esteban Ocon for Alpine with 14 points. Sergio Perez in the 2nd Red Bull has 12 points. Then Kevin Magnussen for Haas with 12. Valtteri Bottas for Alfa Romeo with 8 points. And then Lando Norris, we've just been talking about, there has 6. Lots more to discuss in the show with our guests, of course, Alex Young and a special guest from the UK, Trevor Carlin. But I want to say thank you now for the support we get from WebEx by Cisco, the official collaboration partner of the Go F1 show. And this week, Cisco announced an extension and an expansion, indeed, actually, of their partnership with the McLaren team. So here's a quick look at how they work together.
Who's got the best fans?
That's a very good question.
Let's put up a poll.
Come on, England.
Jayo! Look who's got the best fans.
Yes!
With WebEx, the McLaren F1 team and their fans are competing like never before. WebEx, driving hybrid work.
Welcome back. And breaking news from the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix is that the British tyre driver for Williams, Alex Albon, has been given a 3-place grid penalty for the next Grand Prix, which of course is the Australian Grand Prix on April the 10th, because of a clash that he had with Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin towards the end of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Let's remind ourselves, actually, of the results. Let's look at the results from the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Let's remind ourselves of the top 10 before we get into a chat of those who finished in the bottom half. Here is the top 10. Max Verstappen winning the Grand Prix from Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz for Ferrari. Sergio Perez was fourth ahead of George Russell, Esteban Ocon, Lando Norris, Pierre Gasly, Kevin Magnussen and Lewis Hamilton. Let's have a look who finished outside the top 10 in the Grand Prix, because we want to have a bit of a chat about, let's say, not exactly the losers, but there's only 3 actually to really talk about. Zhou Guanyu, Nico Hülkenberg and Lance Stroll. Let's have a chat about these gentlemen. What do we think about, I think today, the one I'm going to really focus on is Zhou Guanyu. What do we think about first 2 races? You can go first, Trevor. You've observed him in Formula 2. How good is he?
I think he's doing a fantastic job, really, for his first 2 Grand Prix. He scored points on his debut, which is absolutely fantastic. He was unlucky not to score a point today. A bit of a not such an exciting race for him today, but he's keeping himself out of trouble. He's doing his learning on the job, so to speak. You have to remember he's done the least mileage of any driver out there. So he's not getting into any scrapes. He's not ramming into people. He's not doing anything stupid. So fair play to him. He's a lovely young man. He carries himself very well. He's obviously a good driver because he's won many Formula 2 races. So it's good to see him out there. And hopefully if Alpha can keep doing what they're doing and keep putting out such a nice car, he's got a chance of scoring regular points. And we get one of those crazy races, even a top 6. So fair play to him. I'm well chuffed.
And of course, one of the reasons that we only had 13 cars finishing the race is we only had 18 cars starting. We had Yuki Tsunoda retiring before he even got to the grid. But of course, we had that big crash yesterday from Mick Schumacher in qualifying. Great to see that he was basically unharmed. He'll be a bit bruised and battered, I'm sure, tomorrow. Here are some images from our friend of the show, Ian Parks, the expert journalist. Wow. It was actually quite a good summary, really. Alex, your thoughts on Mick's crash yesterday in qualifying?
Yeah, that would have hurt. Yeah, obviously glad that he's okay. Yeah, it would have felt like being hit by a linebacker. It was one of those shunts. It's kind of, actually, I was thinking about it the other day because as a driver, most shunts in these single seaters, when you normally have these terrific shunts where the car disintegrates around you, and you come out of the car and you're just like, oh, that was nothing. I didn't even get hurt. And then occasionally you'll have a shunt where you're like, ouch, that really hurts. And I can remember, because that shunt would have hurt. He'd have been concussed a bit. He would have been winded. And I remember when it happens, because you get a sense of that you're invincible sometimes, and then you have one of these crashes where it does actually hurt, and you just kind of come out and go, whoa. You get a little bit shocked that you can get hurt in a Formula 1 car, because you do sometimes get a bit, as a driver, get a bit complacent that because it's so big and strong and so safe now, because compared to the 80s and 70s, obviously, that that you can actually get hurt in these cars still. It is still dangerous.
Trevor, I want to ask your opinion about Mick, because I think the disappointment of the crash yesterday was that he seemed to be actually really quite on it. And this was in Q2 when he had his crash. I think he was actually ahead of Magnussen at the time he had the crash. And the car was moving around under him, and he seemed quite confident, more than I've actually seen so far. And I suppose the ultimate question is, does he have what it takes? And any other thoughts you might have on Mick Schumacher?
Well, I mean, he's in that funny situation where all of a sudden he's got a really competitive car under his bum. So he's relishing that, which means that there's a chance to get through to Q3 pretty much every weekend. But that's been matched with having Kevin as his teammate. So he's got a great car, but then he's now got to up his game to carry that car. So instead of just aiming for P10, he's got to try and be P9 or P8 to beat Kevin to be in the top 10. So the stakes have upped. I think with his crash yesterday, if he had a little bit more experience, he would have realised he was carrying too much speed in. He would have straightened the wheel and just gone straight across that chicane and not tried to carry the speed through. But he was fully committed, so fair play to him. But once a car bottomed out on that curb, he was just a passenger, and then it's his 800 kilos of mass heading towards the wall. And going back to Alex's point, it's this weight thing that when you hit the wall side on with that force, that's what really shocks your whole body, because there's no disintegration of the car, there's no energy loss in the beginning of the accident, so you take that full force in one go. So that'll be a bit of a wake up call for him, but I don't think it'll temper his enthusiasm, and I think he'll be relishing the fact that he's got a great car and he can regularly score points.
Just 23 years old, of course, and that this would have been his 24th Grand Prix, so he's got some time ahead of him. Let's have a look now at the Constructors Championship, because of course that's, as we always say, it's a bit of a cliche, that's where the money gets paid, and currently it's Ferrari who are in the pound or euros seat with 78 points ahead of Mercedes with 38. Red Bull there are in third place with 37 points. Of course, they didn't score anything in Bahrain last weekend. Alpine fourth with 16 points. Haas fifth with 12. Alfa Romeo sixth with 9 points. AlphaTauri is seventh with 8 points. McLaren eighth with 6 points, and then ninth and 10th Aston Martin and Williams. That's the Formula One Constructors Championship. Well, I want to talk a little bit about, if I may, Formula 2, and a little bit maybe touch on Formula 3, since we've got Trevor Carlin here. And after a win today in the feature race from pole position, the Brazilian driver Felipe Drugovich leads the standings in the FI Formula 2 Championship, ahead of the New Zealander Liam Lawson, who of course races for Trevor Carlin, for the Carlin Racing team. And third in the championship at the moment is Dutchman Richard Verschoor, winner of the Macau Grand Prix. We know him well back in 2019. Drugovich and Lawson have both won a race. Lawson lost a good chance of another victory today after a problem in the pits. We might gloss over that perhaps today in our conversation with Trevor. And another facing bad luck is this man, Théo Pourchaire, the youngest driver in the series at just 18 years of age. Won the feature race in Bahrain but had a mechanical failure in Saudi today. And equal on points with Pourchaire, sixth in the standings, is Indian driver Jehan Daruvala. And for some insight into the Mumbai driver, I caught up a little bit earlier today with the Formula One journalist Niharika Gorpade, who was and indeed is on site in Jeddah.
It's looking like a strong start to him. He's doing better than Hauger. He has more points. Hauger's not had points. And in the first two seasons in Formula 2, you seen him get beaten by his teammate, which was ticked him and then Tsunoda and then ticked him. So at least this year he's strong. He's looking stronger than his teammate. I'd say I want to keep my fingers crossed on this one because Hauger's also an F3 champion, so you can't discount that resume coming in. and he's also a Red Bull driver. So yeah, I think he's looking much stronger than he did in the previous 2 seasons.
Red Bull has, of course, many drivers in Formula One, but also on the way up on the feeder series. Where do you think Jehan sits amongst those other drivers?
If I had to, in the Red Bull camp, at least in F2, we have there's Yuri Vips, there's Lawson, and there is Hauger, and there's Jehan. There are 4 in one category almost. And the other day I was having a chat with Franz Tost, and he didn't even mention Jehan to me.
So what does Jehan have to do to get himself onto the radar of Franz Tost?
I think this year, to impress Tost or to impress even Marco, I think it's going to take beating Hauger. And Hauger's an F3 champion. So you have it right there. Your first fight is with your teammate more than the rest of the grid. But this is going to be his real make or break here. And with Prema, he has a strong team too. I don't know. It's got to be less luck now or more and real driving. He's got to, surge from the back of the field. Something like, he's not a Tsunoda or Verstappen, but he needs to start showing that he's at least a gas leak. That's what I feel. To be honest, I think Indian drivers, I think Jehan has the most experienced resume so far.
For sure.
Yeah. Overseas. He's never had, right from his starting years. So now this is going to be his real make or break.
So good comments, interesting comments from Niharika there, joining us from Jeddah earlier today, just after that second of the 2 Formula 2 races. Alex is grinning. What do you think?
Yeah, I guess because Trevor knows a lot about Indian drivers. I can always remember him running Narain Karthikeyan and Narain crashing in Macau and then winning it. Was it a week later in Korea? Great stories there. Yeah. But yes, Jehan's, he's a good driver, man. He came up at the same time as the Maney brothers. Better backed, but just as talented as them, I think. And yeah, I kind of agree. This is a very important year for him. And if he can string together some good results, show more consistency, because we know he's quick, but if he can show more consistency, that'll really help his cause.
Trevor?
Yeah, I mean, it's Jehan is on the Red Bull program, so he's working with Helmut. Helmut, as we all know, is ruthless. He's a hard taskmaster. Jehan's best chance of getting into Formula One will be with AlphaTauri. So he really, this year, it's his 3rd year in Formula 2. He's with Prima, one of the top teams. So he has to deliver. If he delivers, I see no reason why Helmut wouldn't put him in a car. Obviously, if he's beaten by any of the other juniors, like Liam or Yuri, then that could change the outlook. But yeah, really, Jehan's Formula One future are totally in his hands. He's had a rough start to it, to this season, but he got a podium today, which has got him back in the hunt. So obviously, I wish him well. Obviously, not too well because he's not driving for me anymore. But he's a Carlin guy. He's been with us a long time. We know him. We love him. So if he's another ex-Carlin driver that gets to Formula One, we'll be very, very happy.
That'd be fantastic, and it'd be great for Formula One because it's a little bit like the Zhou Guanyu phenomenon, and to some degree, Drive to Survive in terms of increasing attention in North America. Is that an Indian driver would do wonders for Formula One's interest in that part of the world?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously Formula One is a hugely glamorous, exciting, spectacular, expensive sport. India has got its contrasts. There's some very wealthy people. There's also a lot of poor people. So it's quite a tricky. What's the word people use? A pretty difficult square to circle. When you've got so much poverty, but then so much wealth. So, but there's a massive fan base there for Jehan to tap into. If he can make it to Formula One.
Yeah. Well, back to Formula One. We've got a 2-week break now, which feels like an enormous amount of time between Grand Prix when we get used to them coming thick and fast. Let's have a look at the race calendar showing there the 2 races ticked off on the schedule, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, and then there it is, the Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne is up next on April the 10th, and then we get into races again thick and fast. And you'll notice actually, you look at the schedule, that actually not very many of those circuits what we'd call traditional racetracks. We've got Australia's a street track, of course Imola is a, in inverted commas, real racetrack, Barcelona the same, but then we go down to Silverstone in July before we get back onto a more regular road course. So lots of kind of street style circuits coming up in the first half of the season. This is a favourite part of the show when we try and decide what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
And Alex, what do you think? Who's going to be strong in Melbourne?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're going to see some different things. Obviously, we hope Mercedes come back to the hunt because we would love a 3-way fight at some point. Yeah, Ferrari and Red Bull have very different strengths, yeah? So, the acceleration of the Ferrari is very good. But obviously it doesn't have the straight line speed as the Red Bull. I think Melbourne's going to really suit the Ferrari. I think Ferrari going to be hard to beat in Melbourne. Where we go next, Imola, that could be more of a Red Bull track, I think.
There you go. So it's going to be side by side. Trevor, any thoughts on what's coming up?
I personally think Red Bull are going to sort of get in their stride. I think they'll be strong in Australia. I think Max will be staggeringly good in Imola. It's just I've saw him there in Formula 3, and he was just ridiculously fast. So I think this run of non-traditional tracks actually will play into Max's hands. As we saw this weekend, he pulled it off, and I think your Australia, your Canada, your Bakus are all going to play into Max's hands. Just when you need that last little bit of street fighting nous, I think it's going to play into his hands. And then with the traditional tracks, maybe Barcelona's and Silverstone, it could start swinging back towards Ferrari, and then of course Mercedes will be, they'll be in the hunt fairly soon. You just can't, you daren't write them off.
Staggeringly good and ridiculously fast, says Trevor Carlin about Max Verstappen. That's a pretty good recommendation coming from somebody who has seen 8 of the current grid Formula 1 drivers go through his team. Trevor, I want to say many thanks for joining us today on the Go F1 show. It's been brilliant to have you. I think fans can follow you on Twitter at Trevor Carlin, if I'm not mistaken, and then the team is at Carlin Racing.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
And oddly, your team has a larger following than you do, which is, I don't know what it's reflective of. Perhaps that your team social media manager is more active than you are.
I don't tend to tweet very often, because when I do, I'm either in an airport lounge or somewhere. Maybe I've had a beer too many, and I tweet things I shouldn't do. So I tend to stay off it. But the girls at Carlin do a fabulous job, and they've got a great sense of humour. They see the good and the funny stuff in motor racing, and they tend to post it. So, plus we've got such a varied drivers from all different countries in the world. So we get a fabulous following, and that really helps. We've got a nice community. It's good. It's good fun.
It is.
Good fun. Plus, I have to remember I'm an old guy. And I've only just worked out how to use Twitter.
So thanks to you, Trevor. It's been great to have you with us. And of course, Alex, our regular co-host, it's been brilliant to have your insight. And look forward to having you back in a couple of weeks to look at the next Grand Prix.
Cheers.
Brilliant. That's it, everybody. That's it. Please do follow us. You know about Trevor Carlin, and you know about Carlin Racing. And of course, at Alex Young to follow what Alex is up to, which is many and varied things these days. That's the show for today. Keep following us. Hope you enjoyed the race.